All right, we're back in the studios. Obviously, this doesn't look like a normal start to one of our videos, but this is also not one of our normal videos. There's going to be a series of videos as we put it together of my friend here, Eric Miller. You've seen him on a few of the videos. He's starting to take the role of our kind of like producer, editor, personality at large. And in this video, we're actually talking about or showing a segment of where Eric and his daughter went out west to fish for cutthroat trout. But there's a whole story behind his cutthroat trout crusade or odyssey or basically exploring. And we're going to talk about one of his recent trips where he fished several bodies of water. All right, like I mentioned before, Eric likes to travel out west and fish for cutthroat trout. Now, Eric, explain what you're doing here. You've been all over different parts of out west. So what's the whole madness behind here?
So the method behind the madness is this. So innocently it happened in 2010. I started a golden trout trip, and I was pretty new at fly fishing and ended up catching a really, really awesome golden trout. I only caught one, but it was 21 inches. And I met a really good friend of mine on that trip. We've stayed in contact since. And I got home from that trip and I started just looking at other cutthroat species, just online, just Googled. And then I started to look at the locations of these fish, and I realized,
there's a lot of subspecies.
There's a lot of subspecies, but a lot of these species are near national parks. So we can make a family vacation and also a fishing trip. And that's how it kind of morphed into, my buddy and I, Glenn, we just were like, let's do it.
And see how many different subspecies you could catch. And as a result, it's been taking you all over the Rocky Mountains in the West.
Utah,
yep.
California, Nevada, British Columbia.
So this whole fly fishing thing has turned into an excuse to travel, see the West, experience the different parts and different environments.
Right.
Yeah, it's amazing what fly fishing gets you into.
And taking stuff that I can learn fishing fishing for browns and steelheads in the Great Lakes, and saying, okay, well, let's go out and apply some of this out west. And that's just kind of how
it's amazing sometimes how basic fishing skills just work.
And what are we doing in the winter anyway? I mean, you might get out every once in a while.
Well, we are tying massive amounts of flies.
Well, you are.
Yeah.
But, I like to also look at different places.
So you're using the winter as kind of like a trip.
It's my trip
planning season.
Yeah.
For these didn't go out west and chase these things.
Yep.
Well, so here once again, this video here is going to be just one part of a recent trip of a whole odyssey that he's been on, to see how many different subspecies of cutthroat he can catch. And this time in this series, it's going to be focused on the Yellowstone.
The Yellowstone and the Snake River Fine Spot.
So you ended up at a couple of really cool places, and your daughter went with you on this trip, and she had a heck of a good trip.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to connect with her on this trip for sure.
So this will be our first part. I'm not quite sure how many parts of this video is going to be. Your guide out there was Chris. What was his last name again?
Morrell.
Chris Morrell. Yeah, I met Chris Morrell here. I'm terrible with names, as a lot of you guys know. He came out and fished brown trout with me, so that's how we originally connected. And he has a guide service in Wyoming. I'm going to have Chris Morrell's contact information about his guide service out in Wyoming in the descriptions on this series of videos. And Chris is a great egg. I had a chance to fish with him here on our brown trout waters, and you really get a feel for a guy when you're guiding him and fishing with him. And he's a lot of fun to be on the water with. So I hope you enjoy the video. This is just a small part of Eric's little odyssey of seeing how many cutthroats he can catch. In this particular video, You're not going to see a lot of. It's more of sceneries with us talking. It's on Yellowstone Lake. The weather was really bad, and they were afraid about drowning the camera, so we got very little video, terrible audio. So we're going to supply kind of a blogging overview of what's going on with some of the shots. There's a few still shots of the trout that were caught out on the lake. So I hope you enjoy what little video we have. You find it interesting, a little bit entertaining. So here it goes.
So going into the park that day, we bumped into a traffic jam, and this is what we saw was a bear. And then a little while later, we ended up seeing some buffalo.
Now there's a walking pile of steaks.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way,
this ended up actually being at the end when we were coming in. How many times do you see an elk on a beach? But anyways, so yeah, the temperature around Yellowstone, was right in the 80s, 85s or so. But you get out onto a big body of water that's, by the way, it's very cold.
What did you say, that water temperature is what, in the 50s?
Yeah, I would say it was in the 50s.
And of course, you're in Yellowstone, which is high altitude.
It's the highest. It's the highest elevation lake in the 48s. So,
81
very
day,
high,
40 the next day.
Very right, exactly. And so, consequently, what you have is, like we said, you don't want to drown the camera. And there was actually some pretty big waves. It got more rough in the afternoon. Typical.
So, what were you dealing with? A lot of wind?
A lot of wind.
A lot of wave action.
Yeah, exactly. Waves, but the silver lining in that was we didn't have to make a lot of casts, big casts, to get the fish.
So you could kind of sneak up on them?
The wave action actually relaxed the fish. So, you were doing as much as you could casting wise, but I was getting a hit, like, I don't know, maybe 20 to 30 feet off the boat, which typically you would have to cast like a 70 to 80 foot cast.
So in calm conditions, those fish would be really spooky, but in this case, even though it was so wet and sloppy, didn't want to get the cameras out, it actually made the fishing a little bit easier.
Yes, and the other thing is what you do catch on the lake is going to be substantial. And you'll see in the pictures, the 3 fish that I did get that day were really nice fish.
Now, what kind of flies were you using?
We were predominantly streamer fishing, really, like literally a gold tinsel fly. I don't know that Chris ever had a name for it, but I mean, you're throwing streamers predominantly in the day.
About what size? Or I should say the streamers, at least I always talk about how long.
So, I mean, you're talking probably a size 4 Willy Bugger plus size. So I mean a pretty decent, considering these are 18-inch fish, 20-inch fish. It's a pretty big fly.
So you're still using an aggressive sink tip?
We were using aggressive sink tips that day.
Probably like 1X, 0X for a tippet to survive the heat.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. And typical cutthroat, they fight really hard, and they have a really good fight, and then they just kind of seem to peter out.
So they'll give you a good scrap initial, and then they can become very polite.
Exactly. So that was pretty much the day. It was interesting too. Chris had a little trolling motor on one of his river boats that he actually floats in.
So using a regular drift boat with an electric outboard on it.
And the other key is that he's gotten really good with using a sonar depth finder for depth, but also to see where these fish potentially are. And he's really perfected fishing on the lake, using those tools, and we were fishing very close to shore, not far out at all, you know. So if we had to really bail to get in because the conditions were such, you could easily
take cover
very quickly.
This is Jay at JPEG Guides and Lost River Fishing. We are a year-round fly fishing catch and release guide service. We fish the Lake Ontario tributaries, and then during the spring and the summer we also fish the inland trout streams, classic dry fly fishing. During the heat of the summer we will do the warm water fishing for bass and pike. If you're interested in any of our outings or have any questions, please feel free to email us at fish@lostriversfishing.com. Hope to hear from you, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact us.